The first thing I saw when I got home wasn't my house. It wasn't the porch I'd spent 28 years repairing one board at a time. It wasn't the rusted mailbox leaning slightly to the left, because I'd always been too lazy to fix it. It was a hole in the sky. Now I know that sounds dramatic, but that's exactly what it looked like. I had just spent 6 months working in Greenland, maintaining communication systems for a private research company that paid ridiculous amounts of money to send middle-aged men into places nobody else wanted to live. Most people hear that and imagine adventure. They picture glaciers and northern lights and some rugged guy standing heroically against the elements. The reality was frozen fingers, canned stew, bad coffee, and spending half your day praying satellite equipment didn't decide to quit during a blizzard. But the money was good, and after my wife died, I stopped caring much about comfort. Silence became more valuable than happiness. My name is Russell Hale. I'm 63 years old, and at that point in my life, I honestly believed I'd already lost the thing that mattered most. Turns out I was wrong. Because some losses don't happen all at once. Sometimes they wait patiently for years before finding a new way to hurt you. I landed in Ohio after nearly 30 hours of flights, delays, and airport food that should probably qualify as a criminal offense. By the time I pulled into my driveway outside Ashford Ridge, a little farming community tucked into the hills of eastern Kentucky, I felt like a zombie wearing work boots. Normally I'd go inside first, drop my bags, take a shower, maybe sleep for 12 hours. But I had a ritual. Every single time I came home from a contract, I walked out to the sycamore tree near the back pasture. Didn't matter if I'd been gone 2 weeks or 6 months, I always went there first. My wife Emily and I planted that tree in 1984, back when we were young enough to believe hard work solved everything. Back when our biggest concern was whether we could afford groceries and make the mortgage payment in the same month. We raised 2 kids under that tree, hung lanterns from the branches during family cookouts, buried 3 dogs nearby over the years. Emily used to sit beneath it every evening with a paperback novel and a glass of sweet tea. And when cancer finally took her 7 years ago, her memorial service happened right there beneath those branches because she hated funeral homes, said they smelled like sadness and furniture polish. So whenever I came home, I put my hand on the trunk for a second. Just a second, like checking in, like saying hello. Maybe that sounds stupid. I don't know. Grief makes people do strange things. Anyway, I grabbed my duffel bag from the truck, started walking toward the pasture, and halfway across the field something felt wrong. The horizon looked different. At first I blamed exhaustion. 30 hours without real sleep can do weird things to your brain. I stopped walking, squinted, looked again. Then my stomach dropped. The tree was gone. Not damaged, not trimmed. Gone. Just gone. I remember standing there for several seconds trying to make reality cooperate. You ever have one of those moments where your eyes understand something before your brain does? That's what it felt like. There should have been 80 feet of branches reaching into the sky. Instead, there was empty air. I started walking faster, then jogging, then running. By the time I reached the spot, my chest felt tight enough to crack ribs. All that remained was a stump, fresh, clean, chainsaw marks still bright against the wood. The sawdust hadn't even fully washed away yet. I just stood there staring. The world felt strangely quiet. No birds, no wind, nothing. Just me looking at what used to be the last living thing Emily and I had built together. Then I noticed tire tracks, deep ones, heavy equipment, and those tracks led directly toward the property next door. That's when anger finally showed up. Not the loud kind, not yet. This was something colder. Something slower. The property next door used to belong to an old mechanic named Walter Dunn. Nice guy, fixed tractors, charged people less than he should have. The kind of neighbor every small town needs. Walter died 2 years earlier. His family sold the garage. That's how a man named Gavin Mercer arrived. Gavin was one of those people who seemed manufactured in a laboratory specifically for social media. Perfect beard, perfect smile, perfect vocabulary. Everything looked curated. The old garage became a high-end woodworking studio called Timber and Tide. Reclaimed brick walls, industrial lighting, furniture with price tags that made normal people question their life choices. I met him exactly twice before leaving for Greenland. The first time he introduced himself. The second time he asked about my tree. Funny thing is, I remembered that conversation immediately. We'd been standing near the fence line. He looked at the sycamore and said, "You know, You can't buy character like that anymore. At the time, I took it as a compliment. Standing beside that stump, it sounded different. More like a warning I hadn't understood. I followed the tire tracks across the grass. They led right toward his workshop, and against every piece of common sense I possessed, I got in my truck and drove there immediately. The parking lot was full. Apparently, they were preparing for some kind of spring showroom event. People carried flower arrangements inside. A catering company unloaded supplies. Everything looked cheerful, expensive, polished, the exact opposite of how I felt. I walked through the front doors still wearing travel clothes from 3 airports and half a continent. The showroom smelled like cedar, coffee, and money. Then I saw the table. Front and center under a spotlight sat a massive live-edged dining table. Beautiful craftsmanship. I hated it instantly, because I recognized it. Not the table, the wood. Some people might think that's impossible. It isn't. You spend nearly 40 years looking at something every day. You learn its details, the grain patterns, the knots, the color variations. I knew that tree better than I knew my own reflection, and suddenly I was staring at pieces of it, everywhere. Shelves, benches, wall panels, coffee tables, thousands of pounds of my trees scattered around the showroom like trophies. Then I noticed something that nearly knocked the air out of me. On one of the coffee tables, beneath layers of glossy finish, there was a scar. Someone had tried sanding it away, almost succeeded. Almost, but not quite, because if you looked closely enough, you could still see the faint outline of a heart, and inside that heart were 2 initials, R and E, Russell and Emily. My knees nearly gave out. I reached toward the table without even thinking, and right then, a voice appeared behind me, smooth, confident, practiced. Beautiful piece, isn't it? I turned around, and there stood Gavin Mercer, smiling like a man who had never once expected consequences to arrive at his front door. For a second, neither of us said anything. Gavin stood there with that polished showroom smile, hands tucked casually into the pockets of an expensive denim jacket that probably cost more than my first pickup truck. Behind him, customers wandered between displays, sipping sparkling water from crystal glasses while soft acoustic music drifted through hidden speakers. It felt surreal, like somebody had taken one of the most painful moments of my life and turned it into a lifestyle brand. I looked at him, then I looked at the table, then back at him. Where'd the wood come from, I asked. Simple question, nothing emotional, nothing dramatic, just 6 words. His smile never moved. Locally sourced hardwood, he said. Recovered during land improvement work. Recovered. Funny word. Makes theft sound environmentally responsible. I nodded slowly. That's interesting. It is, he said. I pointed toward the grain. Tall sycamore tree. For the first time, I saw something shift behind his eyes. Just a tiny flicker. A fraction of a second. Most people would have missed it. I didn't. Years of dealing with contractors, inspectors, and government procurement departments had taught me something important. The truth usually arrives half a second before the lie. His smile tightened. Possibly. Our suppliers handle sourcing. Suppliers, another interesting word. I looked directly at him. That tree was on my property. Silence. Not long, maybe 2 seconds, but enough. Enough to tell me he already knew exactly which tree I was talking about. Then he shrugged. Actually shrugged. Like we were discussing a scratched mailbox. There may have been some confusion regarding boundary lines. Boundary lines. There it was. The first piece of legal smoke. The first attempt to make certainty feel uncertain. I asked the question that mattered. Do you have my permission in writing? That smile finally disappeared. Not completely. Just enough. No. I nodded once. That was all I needed. But Gavin kept talking. People like him always do. They mistake confidence for control. Look, Mr. Hale, the material has already been processed and converted into commissioned inventory. Several pieces are scheduled for delivery to clients next week. If there's a disagreement, you're welcome to contact our attorney. Commissioned inventory. Disagreement. Attorney. Every sentence sounded less like a conversation and more like someone reading from a crisis management handbook. I stared at him for another moment. Then I noticed a giant banner hanging near the showroom entrance. Spring Collection, Premier Prevet Mears, Centardent, Frebitate Beziers of Zecha Day 3 days away. I followed his gaze toward the banner, and something about the way he smiled told me everything. He thought he'd already won. The tree was gone. The wood was transformed. The products were sold. In his mind, all that remained was paperwork. Expensive paperwork, maybe. But paperwork. He expected yelling, threats, a public scene. Instead, I simply nodded. Got it. That was all I said. Just 2 words. Then I turned around and walked out. The funny thing is, that seemed to relax him. Big mistake. Because the moment I got back into my truck, I stopped being a grieving husband and became a man building a case. Now here's something most people don't understand. Anger is useful, but only if you put it to work. Otherwise, it just burns energy. By the time I got home, I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. I was interested in evidence. I spent that entire evening sitting at my kitchen table with a notebook and a pot of coffee that probably violated several health regulations. Around midnight, I found the original property survey, yellow paper, folded corners, county stamps fading from age. The survey clearly showed the sycamore standing nearly 7 feet inside my property line, not inches, feet, no overlap, no confusion, no gray area. I stared at that document for a long time, because suddenly the story Gavin wanted to tell wasn't possible anymore. There was no misunderstanding. Somebody had looked at my tree and decided they wanted it. That's a very different thing. Then I started digging through old photographs, boxes and boxes of them. Emily laughing beside the tree, Emily reading beneath the tree, our kids climbing the lower branches, birthday parties, graduation pictures, Christmas lights wrapped around the trunk, 40 years of history, and somewhere around 2 in the morning, I found the photograph. The one that made me stop breathing for a second. Summer of 1988. Emily sitting on a blanket, the carved heart visible behind her, R+E. The exact scar I'd seen beneath the showroom finish. I remember setting the photo down and staring out the window into the darkness. Not crying, just sitting there. Because grief is strange. It changes shape over time. People think losing someone gets easier. It doesn't. You just get stronger carrying it. And then one day somebody rips open a place you thought had healed. The next morning I called an old friend named Calvin Rhodes. Calvin spent 30 years working forestry investigations throughout Kentucky and Tennessee. If someone illegally harvested timber within 3 counties, Calvin probably knew about it. When he retired, he became even more suspicious than he was while employed. Which is saying something. I emailed him photographs, the stump, the furniture, the carved initials, everything. About 15 minutes later, my phone rang. I answered. The first thing he said was, "Well, that's incredibly stupid. Morning to you too. I'm talking about your neighbor. You think it's enough?" He laughed. Actually laughed. Russ, wood grain is like a fingerprint, growth patterns, scar tissue, ring structures. If those pieces came from your tree, a competent expert can prove it. That was the first good news I'd received since stepping off the airplane. Calvin gave me another number, a forensic arborist named Laura McKenna. Apparently there are people whose entire careers revolve around proving where trees came from. America is a fascinating country. 2 days later, Laura arrived at my property. Small woman, work boots, serious expression, the kind of person who looked annoyed by incompetence before breakfast. She spent hours examining the stump, taking samples, measuring growth rings, reviewing photographs, hardly spoke at all. Finally, she stood up, removed her gloves, and looked at me. "If that furniture came from this tree," she said, "I can connect it." I probably smiled for the first time all week. Then things started moving fast. Really fast, because Gavin had made another mistake, an enormous one, a mistake born from arrogance. He advertised everything, every product, every collection, every custom order. His website featured professional photography, social media previews, marketing videos, customer testimonials. The man had essentially documented evidence against himself from 15 different angles. My attorney, a bulldog named Sarah Whitmore, nearly laughed when she saw it. "You know," she said, scrolling through his website, "most defendants at least attempt to hide things. So this is good. This is Christmas." Over the next 48 hours, we assembled everything. Property surveys, photographs, expert analysis, online inventory records, showroom images, sales listings, customer advertisements, piece by piece, document by document. The case started looking less like a dispute and more like a train heading downhill without brakes. Late Friday afternoon, Sarah filed an emergency motion. The goal wasn't damages. Not yet. The goal was preservation. Prevent the inventory from being sold. Prevent evidence from disappearing. Prevent Gavin from shipping pieces across the country. Then we waited. And waiting might be the hardest part of any fight. You spend days gathering momentum, building certainty, preparing for action. Then suddenly all you can do is stare at a phone. Friday night stretched forever. Around 8:40 p.m. I was sitting alone in my living room when Sarah called. I answered immediately. "Tell me something good." There was a pause. Then she laughed. "We got it." I sat up. What exactly did we get? The judge signed everything. For a moment neither of us spoke, because both of us understood what that meant. The showroom, the inventory, the event, all of it. Everything was about to change. Sarah finally broke the silence. "Russ? Yeah? I hope you're free tomorrow morning." I looked out the window toward the darkness where the old sycamore used to stand. Then I smiled. First real smile in a long time. "Oh," I said quietly, "I'm definitely free." Saturday morning arrived cold and grey, one of those mornings where the sky looked like somebody had forgotten to finish painting it. I got up before sunrise, couldn't sleep anyway, made coffee, sat on the porch, watched fog drift across the pasture where the sycamore used to stand. For a few minutes, I let myself imagine Emily sitting beside me. She would have told me not to enjoy what was about to happen too much. She always had a way of pulling me back toward the better version of myself. Unfortunately, she also would have found the whole thing hilarious, especially Gavin. By 9:30, I was parked half a block away from Timber and Tide. The showroom was already buzzing. Luxury SUVs rolled into the parking lot one after another. Men in expensive jackets, women carrying designer handbags, local business owners, real estate developers, people with enough money to spend $15,000 on a dining table and still sleep peacefully afterward. Inside the showroom, staff members moved around setting up displays. Servers arranged catering trays. Champagne bottles sat in silver buckets. Everything looked perfect, like the beginning of a magazine photo shoot. At exactly 10:01 a.m., 3 vehicles turned into the parking lot. A county sheriff's SUV, Sarah's sedan, and behind them, 2 flatbed recovery trucks. Then a third one, because apparently my tree required an entire convoy. I won't lie, that felt pretty good. I stayed where I was and watched. The sheriff stepped out first, Deputy Aaron Blake. Big guy, calm voice. The kind of law enforcement officer who never seemed impressed by drama. Sarah walked beside him carrying a thick folder. Together they headed toward the entrance. A few moments later I followed. When I entered the showroom, Gavin was greeting guests near the front display. The smile appeared automatically when he saw people approaching. Then he noticed the uniforms. The smile disappeared. Fast. Deputy Blake handed him the paperwork. "Mr. Mercer, you've been served." Gavin looked annoyed at first, then confused, then pale. His eyes moved down the pages. I watched the exact moment reality arrived. "What is this?" he asked. Sarah answered calmly. "Court-authorized seizure order involving disputed property pending civil proceedings." For a second, Gavin just stared at her. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. The way people laugh when they're certain something must be a misunderstanding. No, that's impossible." Deputy Blake shrugged. "Judge didn't think so." The room had gone completely quiet. Conversation stopped. Champagne glasses froze halfway to mouths. Everybody sensed something interesting was happening, and humans love interesting, especially when it involves somebody else's disaster. Then the recovery crews walked in. 3 men wearing work gloves and safety vests. No emotion, no hesitation, just professionals doing a job. One of them unfolded a clipboard. Another started attaching inventory tags. The third examined the massive dining table in the center of the showroom, the same table Gavin had proudly displayed beneath the spotlight. The same table built from the heart of my tree. And then they started taking everything apart. The first display disappeared within minutes. Guests watched silently as workers disconnected lighting fixtures and wrapped furniture in protective blankets. A bench went out, then another, then wall panels, then shelving, one piece after another, like somebody was slowly erasing Gavin's entire business in real time. That's when he finally lost control. "Stop." His voice echoed through the showroom. Nobody stopped. I said stop. Still nobody stopped. Because court orders are funny that way. They don't care about feelings. Gavin stormed toward one of the workers. "You can't take commissioned inventory." The recovery specialist looked at him, completely unimpressed. "Sir, I once repossessed a yacht during a wedding reception." He pointed toward the furniture. "This isn't even in my top 10. A few guests laughed. That made things worse. Much worse. because embarrassment was hitting Gavin harder than the actual financial loss. You could see it happening. Every piece removed from the showroom stripped away another layer of control, another layer of image, another layer of the identity he'd spent years constructing. The successful entrepreneur, the visionary craftsman, the sophisticated businessman, all of it was being loaded onto trucks, right in front of his customers, right in front of his investors, right in front of people whose opinions mattered to him. Then one of the workers rolled out the coffee table, the one with the carved heart, the one carrying 40 years of history beneath its glossy finish. As it passed by, I stepped forward. Gavin noticed me immediately. The expression on his face changed. Not anger. Not exactly. It was something darker. The look people get when they realize consequences have become permanent. "You did this," he said. His voice was low, dangerously calm. I looked at the table, then at him. "No." He frowned. "What?" "You did this." The silence between us felt heavy. You turned someone's memories into inventory. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he shook his head, almost disgusted. And that's when he said the thing I'll probably remember for the rest of my life. All this over a tree. Just a tree, that's how he saw it. Not a marriage, not a family, not decades of memories. Just raw material. Something valuable because it could be sold. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an old photograph. Emily standing beneath the sycamore during autumn. Leaves everywhere. That smile she always had when she thought nobody was taking pictures. I handed it to him. He looked down, then back at me. "This is what you cut down." His eyes lingered on the photo, only for a second. Maybe two. I wish I could tell you I saw guilt. I didn't. What I saw was understanding, and honestly that's worse, because understanding means he knew exactly what he'd done. By noon, the showroom looked like a hurricane had passed through. Half the displays were gone. The recovery crews were still working. Guests had stopped pretending to browse furniture and started openly watching the spectacle. One woman walked through the front doors, looked around the nearly empty showroom and asked, "Is this some kind of interactive art exhibit?" Even Deputy Blake laughed at that one. By 1 o'clock, somebody had uploaded video footage online. By dinner time, local news stations were calling. By Sunday morning, the story was everywhere. Not nationally. Nothing that dramatic. But throughout the region, absolutely, people talked. Former customers talked. Former contractors talked. Former employees talked. And once people start talking, old stories have a habit of finding daylight. Apparently, Gavin had a reputation. Corners cut, permits ignored, rules treated like suggestions. One former employee even claimed Gavin regularly joked that rural property owners never checked paperwork. I don't know whether that statement cost him money, but it certainly didn't help. Monday arrived, then Tuesday, then Wednesday, and that's when Sarah received a phone call from Gavin's attorney. The tone had changed dramatically. Funny how that happens. They wanted a settlement discussion. Imagine that. A week earlier, I was the emotional neighbor. Now they wanted negotiations. The truth is, I could have pushed harder. A lot harder. The evidence was strong. The damages were substantial. The legal exposure wasn't getting any smaller. But every night I'd sit on my porch looking toward that empty space in the pasture. And eventually I realized something. Nothing was bringing the tree back. No lawsuit, no judgment, no amount of money. Nothing. The victory I wanted didn't exist anymore. So I made an offer. Compensation for the property loss. A public written admission. Return of every remaining piece of wood recovered from the tree. And acknowledgement that the removal had been unauthorized. The response came surprisingly fast. They accepted. Immediately. A week later, Gavin stood outside the county courthouse reading a prepared statement to local reporters. The beard was still there. The expensive clothes were still there. But something had changed. The confidence was gone. He looked tired, smaller somehow, like reality had finally introduced itself. I watched from across the street. Sarah stood beside me. Neither of us said much. When the statement ended, reporters moved in with questions. Cameras followed. The crowd shifted. And just like that, it was over. Or at least as over as these things ever get. A month later, several recovered pieces from the tree were delivered back to my property. One of them was the coffee table. The one with the carved heart. I keep it in my living room now, not because it's valuable, not because it's beautiful, but because every scar still means something. Sometimes people visit and ask why I didn't destroy it. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe because it survived. Maybe because Emily would have wanted me to keep moving forward instead of staying angry. Or maybe because memories have a strange way of adapting, even when someone tries to cut them down. Now here's the part that still divides people whenever I tell this story. Some folks think I should have gone further, pressed every charge, destroyed Gavin financially, made an example out of him. Others think I overreacted, that it was just a tree. That settlements are enough. Personally, I still don't know. What I do know is this. There are things in life that only look ordinary from the outside. A tree, a porch, a photograph, a patch of land. Until one day somebody takes them away and you realize they were carrying entire chapters of your life. And sometimes the real value of something has nothing to do with what it can be sold for. So let me ask you this. If you were in my position, would you have accepted the settlement? Or would you have taken the fight all the way to the end? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I'm genuinely curious where people stand on this. And if you've ever had someone destroy something that meant far more than money could measure, share your story too. I'd love to read it. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.